In the last section, we were able to finish up our shuffle function, but we noticed that every single time we shuffled our deck of cards, it seems like they were always shuffled in the exact same order. Now they definitely are randomized, but every time we do it, it's always randomized in the same fashion. So I think that our actual logic here is working out correctly, like the actual for loop and swapping these elements is random enough, but clearly there's something not quite right here. So let's figure out what's going on. Well, here's the issue. This random number generator that we have right here is what we refer to as a pseudo-random generator. Go by default uses a random number generator that depends upon some seed value. You can imagine the seed value as being kind of like the source of randomness inside of our number generator. We take this seed value, we pass in the generator, and then the generator is used to make a random sequence of numbers or values or whatever we're randomizing. So the issue here is that by default, the Go random number generator always uses the exact same seed. So every single time we restart our program, as soon as we start trying to generate random numbers, we're always going to get the exact same sequence because we always start from the same exact seed value. So in order to fix this, we need to somehow change this seed value. We need to say every single time that we start up our program, we generate some new seed value and use that as the seed to generate any random numbers in the future. So let's check out the standard library documentation around this rand package and see if we can't figure out how to do this. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this is one of those things that's kind of hard to naturally just look at the docs and figure out. I'm going to tell you that right now. So I am going to walk you through the deck or through these docs and show you exactly how we are going to go through this process. But this is really not something that I would expect you to be able to sit down in like 5 minutes from now and replicate on your own. So this is a very challenging thing. I'm going to show you exactly how we're doing it. But again, I'm not really expecting you to be a total master in how we are approaching this. Okay, so we're at the package rand documentation. We're going to scroll down a little bit, and here's our index section. There's the int n function that we just used, and a little bit lower is the type rand. So let's take a look at this thing. So here's type rand. Type rand is a source of random numbers, and so this essentially is an object that will also generate random numbers for us. However, if we create a value of type rand, we have the ability to specify the seed or the source of randomness. And that's what we really want to do. We want the ability to specify the seed for our random generator. So to create a new copy of a rand type, or to make a value of type rand, we can call the new function. When we call the new function, we have to pass in some source right here. And so the source is the seed. This is our seed right here. So if we can somehow randomize this source right here, that's going to make sure that anytime we use the value rand thing, or this thing that's generating random numbers, we'll always get back a unique or different set of random numbers. And so this is the part where you start to really go down the rabbit hole. Okay, this is the part where I said, yeah, figuring this stuff out the first time is pretty challenging. So now we can't just make use of rand, we have to go and figure out what a source is. So let's click on source right here and figure out what that is. And so when you start looking at this, okay, so to make a source, we call new source, and we pass in a number of type int64, and that's going to create a source for us. And so then that just means we need to figure out how to make a random int64 number. So essentially, you kind of get this like just rabbit hole of clicking through documentation, trying to get to the very bottom and figure out what you need to do. And so this time, I'm going to kind of point us in the right direction. But hopefully just going through these two jumps right here gives you a sense of how we start to look at this documentation. I'll tell you right now, a lot of learning Go is really just learning how to navigate this documentation around the source of all these standard packages. Okay, so let's get to it. We're going to first just write out the function that's going to create this new source and then pass it into our random number generator. And then we'll figure out exactly how we get this kind of seed value right here. All right, so back inside of our code editor, above our for loop, we're going to make our new random number generator that is going to be truly random. So we're going to first start out by making our source object. And remember, you can think of this as being kind of like our seed value. So looking back at our documentation, to create a new source, we call the new source function, which is a part still of the math rand package. So we'll call rand.new source, and then we're supposed to pass in a int64 type value to this. Now we'll hold off on that part right now. Let's just focus on what we do with the source. So after we get the source, that's when we're going to create our new rand object. So we're going to call, again, rand.new, and that's going to return a value of type rand, which is what we can use to actually create our random generator, or excuse me, our random numbers. So back inside over here, we'll say rand.new, and then we'll pass in the source that we just created. And then we'll assign the random number generator that gets produced by this to a value that we'll just call r. So then inside of our actual for loop, whenever we try to generate a random number, rather than looking directly at the rand package's version of int n, we are instead going to use the random number generator that we just created. So we just made a value of type rand right here, capital R rand, this thing right here. And this type of rand also has a function called int n. So here it is right here. And hopefully you're now starting to get a little bit of a sense of what this function signature is really telling us. This tells us that if we have a value of type rand, that value can call the int function. We can pass in an int and get back an int in return. So in other words, right here where we generate our random number, we're going to say, okay, we know that our value r of type rand, so just r, has a function int n. We're going to call it, pass in an int, and that's going to return an int back to us and assign it to new position. Whew. Like I said, not really something I expect you to figure out the very first time. This is definitely kind of pushing the bar in terms of difficulty right here. And by far, this is going to be the most difficult part of this cards project. Now, everything in here is looking pretty good. The very last thing we have to do is make sure that we pass some value of type int64 to this new source thing right here. And so I'm going to just kind of cut to the chase here on how we're going to approach that part. To make sure that we get some value to pass in there that is slightly different every single time we run our program, we're going to look at our time package that is also a part of the Go standard library. So we'll go down to time at the very bottom. Here's time. And inside of time, we're going to look for a function called now. Here's now right here. When we call now, it returns a value of type time. And type time has a function on it called Unix Nano. So let's find Unix Nano in here. Unix, I saw Unix, but we want specifically Unix Nano. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling. It's alphabetical, so I should really just keep going. Okay, Unix Nano right here. And so when we call Unix Nano, we get back a value of type int64. So long story short, every single time we start up our program, we're going to take the current time, which will be reflected as a value of type int64, and we'll use that as kind of the seed value for our random number generator. So every single time we start up our program, the starting time is going to be different, which means we should get a different sequence of random numbers. So back inside of new source right here, we're going to look at the time package. We're going to create a new time object by calling now, and then we'll call the Unix Nano function on that. And we'll save this file. Now when we save it, remember again, I can't say it enough, that VS Code will automatically pull in that time package. If you're not using VS Code, make sure you add that in. All right, so when we look at this code now, it's not the worst thing in the world. And I feel like you can kind of understand it reasonably after you've seen it written out. So we're using this to generate a different int64 number every single time we start up our program. We use that as the seed to generate a new source object, and then we use that source object as the basis for our new random number generator. So I know that this has all been very painful. Trust me, I know it's been painful. And again, I really do not expect you to be able to reproduce this now on the fly. But hopefully this is starting to give you a sense of how we use that documentation. All right, so last thing I want to do is test this out at the terminal. So we'll go back and run go main, go dec, go. And this time around, you'll notice that the last four elements and really everything inside of here is now much more randomly generated. So I see 2 4 ace, and then 3 4 3, 3 2 3, 2 ace ace, and clearly, yeah, this feels like it's sufficiently randomized. So that's random number generation in a nutshell with Go. I know it's been a nasty little thing, but we did pull it off. So I think that this pretty much concludes some of the main functions that we wanted to put together inside of this cards project. But I think that we're not quite done with this project, so let's take a quick break and continue in the next section.